You're listening to Simply the Best Sports Take, the best podcast breaking down the best stuff in sports with host Sean Bingham. His takes are so good, he dropped the mic, but then you wouldn't be able to hear him, and that would suck.
Welcome into STB Sports Take, Simply the Best Sports Podcast. I am your host, Sean Bingham. Thank you for joining us. We are on YouTube, we are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor Podcasts. Everywhere you get your podcasts, we are there. Please hit that subscribe button, whatever platform you're watching or listening on. Please subscribe. And you know what? I'm going to ask for one more favor. Please share the podcast with a friend. I would love that so much, you guys. Whatever platform you're on, you can check the description out and see the timing at which we hit different segments. So you can skip ahead, skip back, get the content you want. I'm going to start off today's podcast by actually replying to a few of you who reached out. I had a Facebook message, I had some texts from friends, and then I had some comments on YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, please hit the comment button and comment below. And then also you can send in a voice message, which if you've been following, you've heard a few of these. You can actually send a voice message in through the Anchor app. It's totally free to download, anchor.fm. If you want to do it online, but it is easier to do it on the app, I've noticed. Really quick and easy. Literally just record into your phone, hit send, and it's done. Really cool. And then I can play it in a future podcast. So it's really fun. But I wanted to respond to a couple of things. There was some comments on the last one about so I did my top 10 or top 5 actually, point guards of all time. And somebody asked, hey, where would you put Gary Payton? And would you put him in your top 10? And my answer is no, I wouldn't. I think Gary Payton is a fantastic player. He did end up getting a title with the Heat, with Shaquille O'Neal and Dwayne Wade and that Miami Heat team in 2006. So he does have that on his resume. He was definitely more of a role player at that time. He was coming off the bench, limited minutes, and he was definitely the tail end of his career. So it's not the same as if he had beaten Michael Jordan with the Sonics in 1996, which is crazy to think that was 10 years earlier that he played in the finals against Jordan, and then 10 years later he's with D. Wade and actually wins a title. So it doesn't carry the same weight to me. He is an all-time great defender, arguably the greatest defender at his position, which was mentioned in the comment. And then somebody commented that they would take Gary Payton over Russell Westbrook. I would not. I know that Russell Westbrook rubs a lot of people the wrong way. He doesn't rub me the wrong way. I love how he plays with so much passion, and he is a stat monster. And it's not just padding stats. It's not just filling the stat sheet for stats' sake. It leads to wins. As I mentioned yesterday, or maybe it was 2 days ago, I can't remember, but as I've mentioned in a recent podcast, Russell Westbrook, when he gets a triple-double, his team is winning 75% of those games. 75%. So him doing these monster rebounding nights and monster assisting nights and monster scoring nights, that is leading to wins for his team. So I love the way he plays. The stats alone are so tremendous, and the proof that it does lead to wins is so great that to me you have to have Russell Westbrook ahead of a Gary Payton type of player. Russell Westbrook doesn't make my top 5, but he does make my top 10. So again, just to recap, and by the way, I thought about who my top 10 would be. So I had Steph, Magic, Stockton, Isaiah Thomas, and then CP3. Those are my top 5. And then I said after that, the next guys in the mix would be Steve Nash, Russell Westbrook, Oscar Robertson, Jason Kidd. And that was only 9. So I thought, you know what, if I'm going to say Gary Payton doesn't belong in the top 10, I better at least have a 10th guy I would take ahead of him. And that guy would be Tony Parker. Tony Parker led those Spurs teams. I mean, obviously, Tim Duncan's an all-time great. Manu Ginobili was a fantastic sixth man of the century, player. But Tony Parker was the floor general. He's won multiple titles. He's a many-time All-Star. I don't know. I didn't look it up. But Tony Parker is the guy that came to mind as like, you know what? That guy won games throughout his career. He could score. He could pass. He could shoot. He was a leader, and it led to titles. So I would take a Tony Parker over a Gary Payton. I do think Gary Payton's right there in the mix, though. Even if you take James Harden, does James Harden count? I mean, is James Harden a true point guard? If he is, for those that would consider James Harden a point guard, I would also take James Harden over Gary Payton. But Gary Payton's right there around like 12, 13, 14, 15, somewhere in that range. But I feel confident that Tony Parker is a guy I would take ahead of him. So, and I actually decided to rank them all the way through 10th. So you heard Steph, which by the way, I need to mention this while we're talking about it. Damian Lillard just a few days ago was on the Dan Patrick Show and said that Steph Curry would go down as the second greatest point guard of all time, which is interesting because I feel like he's already the greatest of all time. But here's the thing. Damian Lillard views Steph as a peer, someone who he knows has accomplished more, but the competitor in Damian Lillard looks at Steph and he's like, he's not that much better than me. So if he's the greatest point guard of all time, then I guess I am the second or third, So I can't say he's the greatest. Excuse me. So that's where Damian Lillard's coming from. And I get it. I don't blame him. But the accomplishments that Steph has racked up that Damian Lillard has not, scoring titles, league MVPs, championships, these are all things that Damian Lillard has not accomplished. And so while Damian Lillard is, for lack of a better term, kind of a poor man's Steph Curry, even though Damian Lillard's a fantastic player and has the potential to go down as an all-time great, he's not there yet. He hasn't earned the right to be in this conversation of certainly not top 10. I think you get into like top 15, top 20. Another guy that just came to mind, by the way, is Allen Iverson. If he's a point guard, some called him a shooting guard, some called him a point guard. If he's a point guard, you got to have him ahead of Gary Payton. Chauncey Billups. I might take Chauncey Billups ahead of Gary Payton. There's a lot of guys. It's a position that's had a lot of talent throughout the history of the league. But, yeah. So anyway, my top 10, again, I would say Steph is number one. I get where Damian Lillard's coming from. I get where everybody's coming from if they say Magic Johnson. Very hard to argue that. To me, though, Steph has actually changed the way the game is played. He's literally changed the way the game is played. I've been critical of Steph Curry. I've also been heaping praise on him. It's kind of like I'm hitting it from both angles here. I did say 4 years ago that in 5 years, Steph would be irrelevant. And then I defined irrelevant as he would not be the number one option on a championship contending team. And that has proven to be true. Irrelevant was probably the wrong phrase or the wrong word to use, because just not being the number one option on a championship level team doesn't mean you're irrelevant. So that was probably, blunder on my part. I was wrong there. Because here he is 4 years later. He's got one more season to go before my prophecy has a chance to be true or false. But I don't think you'll see Steph win another title. Certainly not as the number one option. That's just how I feel. He actually has only won one title as the number one option, and that was in 2015. The next two he got, Kevin Durant was the number one option by a long shot. And the one thing that Steph's going to go down missing in his career, his resume when his career is done, the one glaring omission is going to be Finals MVP. I don't think you'll see him win Finals MVP ever. And he has 3 titles. He has 2 MVPs, no Finals MVP. Iguodala got the first one, which is a little bit weird. And then Kevin Durant got the next 2, which was very deserving. So that's where Steph is lacking. I don't know that you'll even see him get to another Finals. I don't think you'll see him win another Finals. Certainly, I doubt they'll even get to one. And I'd be very, very, very shocked if he were to win one as the number one option and win Finals MVP. I think he will retire without that. That being said, he actually changed the way the game is played. Magic Johnson brought popularity to the game. Magic Johnson brought some flair and some charisma and kind of put the NBA on the map a little bit. But it remained a big man's game throughout Magic's career. It was get the ball into the center, and he played with all-time greats. I mean, those were super teams beyond what we see nowadays. James Worthy, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson. I mean, these were stacked teams. So Magic had phenomenal teammates, one of the all-time great coaches in Pat Riley. And so, yeah, he won 5 titles. Will Steph get to 5? Probably not. The NBA is much better now, though. Steph can shoot and score in a way that Magic Johnson never even dreamed of. So, to me, I'm going to give a slight edge to Steph Curry because he does have the shooting ability that is so far above anything we've ever seen that it truly puts him in a league of his own. It's like Steph Curry is in his own league for shooters. And then in the next league down, you have guys like Ray Allen or Reggie Miller or whoever. And so he's in a league of his own from a shooting perspective. He can still dish it out and get assists. And then he's got the scoring titles, the MVPs, and the championships to go with it. So to me, slight edge to Steph over Magic. But I'm not going to argue with people too much that say Magic's number one because there's a really good argument that he is. But anyway, so after Steph, Magic, Stockton, Isaiah, CP3, my order would be at 6th. I did give it to Steve Nash. I felt like, you know what, Steve Nash was one of the all-time great passers, and he was a really, really good shooter. He was very unselfish, very high basketball IQ. So I would give it to Steve Nash. 7th, I actually put Russell Westbrook. Again, the guy just puts up such crazy numbers, and it does lead to wins. And we've watched him drag teams to the playoffs before. He's doing it again right now with the Wizards. So I would put Russ at 7, Oscar Robertson 8, Jason Kidd 9, and then Tony Parker at 10. That would be my top 10. So, okay, moving on from that. One other thing that came in yesterday, we talked about which title's harder to win, a Super Bowl title or a NBA title. And I put I'm struggling here right now. Sorry, my train of thought is realizing I should have checked this Instagram, because I put a poll up on Instagram, and the last I checked, there were a few hundred votes, and it was like, I want to say it was like 60-something% to 30-something percent saying that the NFL Super Bowl title is the more difficult title to win than the NBA title, which I also said on the podcast yesterday. And a friend of mine, Mike Salmon, he messaged me on Facebook and said, just listen to your take on a couple things. Your perspective is on how hard it is to win is from a player's perspective, and I agree with you from that perspective. But put yourself in an owner's role, and it becomes harder to win the NBA for all of the reasons you mentioned. If I'm not in the upper echelon of the NBA, good luck. Minnesota Timberwolves, ? Not happening anytime soon. Very true. Very, very true. A-Rod just bought the Minnesota Timberwolves. Well, he's part of a group that is. So we'll see if they can ever do it. Probably not. So yes, I agree. But I was definitely, just to clarify, I was definitely talking yesterday from a player's perspective. And I think that's what Kendrick Perkins was talking from as well. From an owner's perspective, no question it's harder to win in the NBA if you are not in one of those very elite 12 teams from the last 40 years that has won a title. So anyway, quick thing there. Just wanted to recap some of the questions and comments we had. So hit me up with questions. You can hit me on Twitter. You can send in your voice message through the Anchor app. You can comment on YouTube, whatever you want. Love the interaction. So I want to recap some of last night's games. Jazz lose last night. Very, very frustrating. They shot horribly, like horrendously, awfully bad. And that's the problem. If you live by the three, you die by the three. We could not shoot at all last night. Lose at home to the Blazers, which was a really big game. I really wanted to see the Jazz win because it would have knocked the Blazers back into a tie with LA, because LA did win last night. They didn't even play LeBron or AD, and they beat the Rockets. That's just how awful the Rockets are. But it would have put the Blazers and the Lakers in a tie for the 6th seed. Now the Blazers do own the tiebreaker, but they have the harder schedule coming up. Portland has to play at Phoenix and then versus Denver. Those are teams that are going to be playing to win, and they're better than Portland. So very good chance that Portland finishes 0-2, and they should have finished 0-3, but the Jazz kind of blew an opportunity there. The Lakers play at Indiana, then at New Orleans. New Orleans is now out of play-in contention, so I think they'll just be cruising a little bit. We don't know if the Lakers are going to continue to sit Anthony Davis and LeBron James. I guess we'll see. If they play either of them, I think those are both very winnable games. And so I do think there's a chance the Lakers still jump the Blazers, but chances are much, much slimmer now that the Jazz gave the Blazers that win, which is really unfortunate, because if that game turns out to be the difference maker in the Jazz having to play the Lakers in the first round versus, somebody else like the Warriors or whatever, that would be a real bummer. So we'll see what happens there. The Hawks beat the Wizards again. Not a huge deal. Those are both teams that aren't going to do any real damage in the playoffs. But again, we just follow it because I made the bold prediction that the Wizards would make the playoffs. They will. They're doomed to a play-in game at this point, and they're doomed to having at least one of those be on the road. Maybe they get the 9 seed, and so they can get that first play-in game at home. But then even after that, you have to go play on the road at the loser of the 7-8 play-in matchup. So see what happens there. If Bradley Beal comes back, I think you see the Wizards actually make the playoffs. I think the Wizards would win 2 games in a row as the 9 or the 10 seed and reach the actual playoffs as the 8 seed. But we'll see. The Nets crushed the Spurs. James Harden was back and looked phenomenal. It was like he never took any time off. Came off the bench, played a 20-something minutes, had 18 points, 11 assists, 7 rebounds, shot really well. He was like 6 of 8. The dude's good. The dude's freaking good. He's winning me over. And then I mentioned the Lakers beat the Rockets. So Anthony Davis and LeBron James don't play. Kyrie sat out. We saw Kevin Durant and James Harden take extensive time off this year. And I'm just like, the NBA's got to fix this. I've mentioned this several times, so I don't want to beat a dead horse here. But how do they keep allowing players, star players, to not play? The ratings are going down because of this. I also think that the NBA's hard stance on far left politics isn't helping them either. I think they should just be a fun outlet of entertainment. I'm all for the NBA and everyone out there in the world standing up for what you believe in. I think they should do that. But no matter what you believe in, you got to understand that other people believe different things, and you don't want to be shoving stuff down people's throats, right? And I feel like they've taken a little bit too much of a political stance. Like you've seen the NFL stand up for what's right, and they haven't done it in a way that's, been a little bit too in your face. Same with other leagues. The NBA has been a little bit more in your face, and I think that's hurt them a little bit, just to be honest with you. Obviously, cord cutting, people going away from cable TV and just going to streaming services, I think that's hurt them as well. But I think a big thing here is that their star players are sitting out too much. I don't want to tune in and watch the Lakers without LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Are you kidding me? If I'm turning the TV on, and I see Rockets Lakers with no LeBron James, no Anthony Davis, and then the Rockets, I don't even know who's on their team anymore. Like I'm not going to sit and watch that game. Why would I watch that game? Even if I'm a Lakers fan, there's a chance I don't watch that game. It's just not fun. There's nobody to watch. So they've got to fix this. The NBA has to find a way. They've got to make your star players play. And that's what they're getting paid for. That's what the networks have paid for. That's what the fans pay for. The fans don't pay to go to games to not watch the stars play, and they don't sit on their couch to watch TV and not have the stars play. And then, so if they're not watching, then the networks are losing out on their money, sponsors are losing out on their money, and it's just not fair. So they've got to do something to fix it. Everyone's just, at this point, like everyone's just hanging out and waiting for the playoffs to start. Lakers and Nets especially, they've been the favorites the whole year. The Lakers might be the 8 seed, and they 1,000% have the ability to win it all as an 8 seed, which would be unprecedented. It's never happened, but it could happen this year. And I'll tell you right now, Jazz fans, I got to be real here. If we play the Lakers in the first round and LeBron and AD are even like 85, 90%, we will lose. We will lose. They're better than us. They just are. We really, really want them to have to go through other teams first, and there's no shame in that. That's the whole point of the regular season, is to be rewarded with the seedings. And so if there's any way that we can have the Lakers have to go through the Clippers and the Suns first, those would be hard-fought 6-7 game series. Guys get tired. Maybe they get a little dinged up. Never wish an injury, but maybe it happens. Then they get to the Jazz, and the Jazz have home court advantage. They've played 3 or 4 fewer games. They're a little bit healthier, a little bit more rested, and have home court advantage. Then all of a sudden it's like, maybe we can win this and get to the finals. But if we play them in the first round and LeBron and AD are coming off of like 3 months rest, that's what they did last year. It was pandemic induced last year, but it was the same concept. They sat and rested because of the pandemic, and LeBron came back, and it's like, oh, all of a sudden I feel like it's a fresh new season. And it was. Several months had been taken off. So I really don't want to see the Lakers and the Jazz in the first round. I really don't want to see it at all. And there's a good chance that happens because the Warriors are hot right now. And if the Warriors get to host that, actually the Lakers would host it. So the Lakers will host the play-in game. You'd think LeBron and AD would play. You'd think that would be important enough that they would play. So maybe they win that and they get the 7th seed. And if they're the 7th seed, then all is fine. They would play the Suns first round, and then the Suns would play the Clippers in the second round. So it's really the same scenario. We just don't want the Lakers to fall to that 8 seed. I don't see that happening, but our blunder against the Blazers last night could affect that because, well, we'll see. But, okay, wanted to play a little bit of a pretender versus contender. The Hawks have the 3rd best record in the NBA since March 1st, but they're total pretenders. Okay, so I'm going to go through the standings a little bit and do contender-pretender. 76ers, they're contenders. Nets, absolutely contenders. Bucks, contenders. Hawks, pretenders. Heat, they're fringe. I would say they're barely contenders. Like, it's not, we shouldn't be shocked beyond belief if they were to somehow make their way to the finals. They did it last year, but they're closer to the pretender category. Knicks are absolutely pretenders. Celtics, Hornets, Pacers, Wizards, all pretenders, okay? So in the East, you've got the top 3 teams, and then I would say the 5 seed Heat, who you should consider, like, wouldn't be shocked if those teams made the finals. In the West, Jazz, Suns, I would say the Suns are pretenders. The Jazz are contenders only if the stars align. I got to just be real. We need a few things to fall in our favor to win multiple 7-game series and get all the way to a championship run. And so while we're a fantastic regular season team this year, I do think that we need a few things to fall in our favor the chips need to kind of fall our way if we're going to win a title. But I would say we're contenders as much as the Milwaukee Bucks at least are, or 76ers. Suns, I think, are pretenders. I do. I know they beat the Jazz 3 times this year. I just don't see the Suns winning a title. I don't even see them reaching the finals. Clippers are absolutely contenders. Nuggets are pretenders. Blazers, pretenders. Mavericks, pretenders. Lakers are absolutely contenders. And then the Warriors, Grizzlies, Spurs, pretenders. So I think you've got 3 or 4 teams in each conference where it could happen. But the teams that really have the best chance are the Nets. The Nets are the hands-down favorite, in my opinion, especially seeing James Harden come back last night and just dominate. They're so good. They're so good. And sure, they don't have the chemistry that we've talked about for weeks now, but kind of they do, because they've had just at least one, or they've had a lot of experience with two of them playing, Kyrie and Harden, or Kyrie and KD, or KD and Harden. Like, they've had a lot of games where it was at least 2 of them. They've only had 7 where all 3 of them played, so that is a little weird, but there's so much talent there, and I don't see anybody in the East really stopping them. Like, in a 7-game series, I'm not taking the Sixers or the Bucks, and there's really nobody else. I mentioned the Heat, but no, the Heat aren't going to beat the Nets. So to me, the Nets are the hands-down favorite going into the playoffs, but keep an eye on it. Okay, last thing I wanted to mention, Forbes came out. I always love these. Forbes came out with their top 10 most valuable franchises in all of sports. It was Cowboys, Yankees, Knicks, Barcelona with Lionel Messi, Real Madrid, Golden State Warriors, Steph Curry, what an investment that was, Los Angeles Lakers, New England Patriots, New York Giants, and then Bayern Munich. So we had 3 soccer teams, I think we had 4 NFL teams. Then we had 3 NBA teams, right? Did I get that right? I think I did. Barcelona. I think we had 3 soccer teams. Yeah. And then 1 baseball team. That's the other one. 1 baseball team, the Yankees. So that was the list. Once upon a time, the Washington football team was the highest valued franchise in all the world. Not too long ago, maybe 10 years ago or so. But they also came out with the list of the highest paid athletes in 2020. Conor McGregor topped the list. Messi was number 2. Ronaldo number 3. Dak Prescott number 4 because of his fat contract he just signed. LeBron number 5. Neymar number 6. This, of course, included endorsements and everything. Roger Federer number 7. Lewis Hamilton, who I literally have never heard of. He's a NASCAR driver or a Formula One driver, it looks like. Number 8, Tom Brady, number 9, Kevin Durant, number 10. So interesting that there's a guy that's one of the highest paid athletes in the world, and I truly and sincerely had never heard of him. So very interesting, but that's your list of top 10 highest valued franchises and highest paid athletes. Big games tonight in the NBA, guys. Last mention is the Washington football team drew, I think, a very difficult schedule. NFL schedule came out yesterday, and Washington has to play the 4 best teams in the NFL, none of which are in their division. So they're playing the Bucks, they're playing the Packers, they're playing the Bills, they're playing the Chiefs. Who were the 4 teams in the AFC and NFC championship games last year? The Chiefs, the Bills, the Bucks, and the Packers. And Washington has to play all 4 of them, and none of them are in their division. Feels like a raw deal there, but I'll get more into the NFL schedule later. That's all the time I have for today. I will see you mañana. I am out. Peace.
Thanks for hanging with Simply the Best Sports Take. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and check out STBSportsTake.com. Simply the best in sports.
'Cause we are